The world knew Damian Rose as the King of Wall Street, a billionaire who had everything: the penthouse, the jet, and the perfect quiet wife, Ainsley. But in the glittering world of New York's elite, quiet is another word for invisible. He mocked her simple clothes, humiliated her at glittering galas, and carried on a brazen affair with a supermodel. He told his friends she was practical, uninspired, and not the face of a brand. What he didn't know is that while he was chasing his next billion, his plain wife was quietly building an empire. And at the most exclusive event of the year, he was about to find out exactly who she was. The crystal chandeliers of the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Great Hall dripped light onto the shoulders of New York's 1%. It was the annual Winter Wish Gala, the most exclusive high-stakes charity event of the season, and Damian Rose was in his element. Damian was a man carved from granite and ambition. His company, Rose Capital, didn't build things. It acquired them, stripped them for parts, and sold the scraps for a profit. He was a corporate raider in a $20,000 Tom Ford tuxedo, and he moved through the room with the predatory grace of a shark. And beside him, like a small, plain dinghy tethered to a super yacht, was his wife, Ainsley. Ainsley Rose was to the glittering society of Manhattan a curiosity. She wasn't ugly, but she was neutral. Tonight, while other women were encased in feathers, sequins, and sculptural masterpieces by Schiaparelli, Ainsley wore a simple, sleeveless black column dress. It was timeless, perfectly tailored, and utterly devoid of flash. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple chignon, and her only jewelry was a pair of pearl earrings, the same ones she wore almost every day. "Damian, darling," a voice like cut glass trilled. Damian turned, his face splitting into a brilliant white smile. "Serafina, you look explosive." Serafina Croft, a model whose fame was built on her Instagram feed and her proximity to powerful men, slithered up to him. She was wearing a crimson gown that seemed to be held on by sheer willpower and double-sided tape. She kissed Damian, leaving a smear of gloss on his cheek, a gesture that was far too intimate. Ainsley stood half a step behind her husband, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. She didn't flinch. She didn't scowl. She simply existed. "And Ainsley," Serafina said, her eyes raking over the simple black dress with manufactured pity. "How classic. Is that vintage?" "It's just a dress, Serafina," Ainsley said, her voice soft. "Of course it is, darling," Serafina purred, linking her arm through Damian's. "Damian, you must come and say hello to the senator. He's dying to talk about the Hamptons merger." Damian, who had already forgotten Ainsley was there, allowed himself to be pulled away. "Business, my love," he murmured, not looking back. He didn't mean Ainsley. Ainsley was left alone at the edge of the throng. This was her life. She was the Rose appendage, the quiet, unobtrusive +1. She watched her husband laugh, his hand resting possessively on the small of Serafina's back. She saw the photographer's bulbs flash, capturing Damian and Serafina, the power couple. Ainsley was just out of frame as always. She found their table number 1 front and center. She sat a ghost at the feast and took a sip of water. Later, Damian returned, flushed with champagne and self-importance. He sat beside her, leaning in close. Ainsley could smell Serafina's perfume on him, a cloying, sugary scent called scandal. "God, I wish you'd try," he hissed, his voice low and vicious, beneath the string quartet. Ainsley turned to him, her gaze level. Try what, Damien? To look the part. Look at you. You're my wife, Ainsley. You're supposed to be an asset, not wallpaper. Look at Serafina. That's a woman who understands her value. That's a brand. I see, Ainsley said. No, you don't. He scoffed, adjusting his cuffs. I'm closing the biggest deal of my life, a multi-billion-dollar acquisition of a new European luxury fund. These people, they don't want practical. They want aspirational. They want power. And I look over and my wife is dressed like the help. The words struck as they were intended to. A younger Ainsley would have cried. The Ainsley of today simply nodded, folding her napkin in her lap. I'm sorry I disappoint you. Just stay here, he said, standing up. Don't wander off. I have to go network. Try not to look so beige. He left again, a planet returning to his true sun, Serafina. Ainsley watched him go. She sat at the table for precisely 10 more minutes, maintaining the placid, agreeable mask of Mrs. Rose. Then she quietly picked up her small, unbranded clutch. She stood. No one noticed. The security guard at the main entrance, who recognized her, looked surprised. Leaving so early. Mrs. Rose, I'm not feeling well, she said softly. He nodded, opening the grand door. Shall I get the Rose car for you? No, thank you, Ainsley said. I'll just take a cab. She stepped out of the museum's bubble of light and into the cold, sharp reality of the New York night. She walked past the line of waiting Maybachs and Bentleys, raising a hand to hail a yellow taxi. As it pulled away from the curb, she looked back at the glittering facade of the Met. She saw Damien through the window, laughing, a glass of champagne in one hand, his other arm wrapped around Serafina. He hadn't even noticed she was gone. Where to, lady? The cabbie asked. Ainsley's face, which had been passive and soft all night, hardened. Her posture straightened. A cold, clear light entered her eyes. Soho, she said, her voice dropping an octave, losing its breathy, wifely quality, and gaining a new, sharp authority. Corner of Green and Prince. The taxi merged into the traffic, taking her away from the life Damien thought she lived, and toward the one she actually did. The transformation had already begun. The Rose penthouse on Park Avenue was 10,000 square feet of cold, white, minimalist isolation. It was Damien's taste. He called it clean. Ainsley called it a mausoleum. The cab didn't go there. It pulled up to a discreet cast-iron building in Soho, one that still looked like a 19th-century warehouse. Ainsley paid the driver, slipped out, and entered a private code into a brass panel by the freight elevator. The elevator opened directly into a sprawling top-floor loft. But this was no home. It was a high-tech, high-security design studio. Where the penthouse was cold and white, this space was warm and alive. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling pinboard, covered in sketches, fabric swatches, and leather samples. Another was lined with industrial shelves, holding 3D-printed prototypes and sculpted lasts. In the center of the room, a team of 3 people was huddled around a massive computer monitor, arguing in rapid French. They all stopped and turned as Ainsley entered. Anya. Thank God, said a sharp-dressed man with a silver goatee. This was Javier, her COO, and the only person in the world who knew her full story. Ainsley pulled the pins from her chignon, and her hair fell to her shoulders. She was no longer Ainsley. In this room, she was Anya, or as the fashion world knew her simply, I. Javier, status till, she said, shedding her black dress as she walked, revealing a simple slip underneath. She tossed the dress onto a chair. Burn that. The argent clasp is still not right, Javier said, gesturing to the monitor. The tension is wrong. It snaps, but it doesn't sing. And the tannery in Milan sent the wrong calf skin. It's half a shade too warm. Ainsley strode over her bare feet, silent on the polished concrete floor. She examined the 3D rendering of the handbag clasp. It's the spring. The coiling is too loose. Tell the engineers to increase the torque by 0.5 newtons. And as for the calf skin, reject it. Tell them if they can't match the Pantone, I'll buy the entire tannery and fire their head of quality control. Yes, Anya. The show is in 3 weeks. There is no room for too warm. She thought. This was Aura, the most exclusive, enigmatic and explosive luxury brand to emerge in a decade. Aura didn't do influencer marketing. It didn't have a flashy logo. It didn't even have a public-facing designer. It was a ghost. Aura was built on anonymity and an obsessive, ruthless pursuit of perfection. Its signature handbag, the Argent, cost $40,000, and the waitlist was rumored to be longer than Hermès. The brand's owner was known only as A recluse, rumored to be an eccentric European aristocrat. That recluse was currently pulling on a pair of old jeans and a black cashmere sweater, her face illuminated by the glow of the workstation. Ainsley had started Iora 8 years ago, 2 years into her marriage. She had used a small inheritance from her grandmother, money Damien had dismissed as pin money, and told her to buy a nice painting with. Instead, she had anonymously invested it. She, an art history major, with a minor in material science, had seen a gap in the market. The old luxury brands were getting tired, lazy, coasting on their heritage. The new brands were just loud, empty hype. Ainsley wanted to create something that was both timeless craft, married to cutting-edge technology. She started with a single bag, one she designed and commissioned from a master artisan in Florence. It took a year. She sold it to a single discerning client, then another. She built her brand one whisper at a time. She kept it a secret from Damien initially, as a form of protection. Early in their marriage, she had shown him a sketch for a high-tech travel bag. He had glanced at it and laughed. "Stick to the charity lunches, sweetheart. Leave the business to me." That laugh had forged her armor. She created a firewall that would be the envy of the CIA. Anya had a separate legal identity. Aura was owned by a blind trust based in Luxembourg, which was in turn owned by a holding company in Switzerland. Ainsley Rose didn't exist in Aura's world, and A didn't exist in Damien's. Javier watched her work. She was relentless. She examined every stitch, every seam, every single line of code for their new e-commerce site. This plain woman, who her husband thought was too simple to dress herself, was currently micromanaging the development of a proprietary alloy for a watch bezel. "The gala?" Javier asked quietly, handing her a strong black coffee. "As expected," Ainsley said, not looking up from a leather hide she was inspecting with a jeweler's loupe. Serafina Croft. She was wearing crimson, tacky. And Damien... Ainsley finally paused. She looked at Javier, and for a second the mask of A slipped, revealing the wife. "He called me beige wallpaper." Javier's face tightened. "He's a fool. A loud, arrogant, ignorant fool." "Yes," Ainsley said, the mask sliding back into place. "But he's a useful fool. His obsession with status is the best marketing I could ask for." She turned back to the pinboard. It was covered in sketches for Aura's first-ever public runway show, scheduled for Paris Fashion Week. The industry was hysterical with anticipation. Vogue had dedicated an entire column to guessing A's identity. "He humiliated me tonight, Javier," Ainsley said, her voice very quiet. "He did it in front of people he wants to impress. He made me small so he could feel big." Anya, change the finale look, she said, her voice like ice. She grabbed a charcoal pencil and strode to a fresh sheet of paper. I'm scrapping the velvet gown. I want architecture. I want power. Her hands moved with a feverish, controlled energy. A design appeared on the paper, a severe, powerful, breathtakingly elegant suit. It was minimalist, but the cut was so precise it looked like a weapon. This, she said, tapping the sketch, this is the final look. Get the atelier in Milan started tonight. Javier nodded, his eyes wide. He knew what he was seeing. It wasn't just a new design. It was a declaration of war. He thinks I'm wallpaper, Ainsley whispered, brushing charcoal dust from her fingers. It's time to show him what the house is made of. For the next 2 weeks, Damien Rose was a storm of ambition. The European deal was all he could talk about. He paced the white penthouse, his phone seemingly fused to his ear, shouting at his analysts. I don't care what it costs. Get me a meeting, he yelled, loosening his tie. Ainsley sat on the sofa reading a book on Byzantine art. She looked up, her face a mask of mild inquiry. Is everything all right, Damien? It's this Aura brand, he snapped, throwing his jacket onto a white Eames chair. It's the keystone. The whole luxury fund deal pivots on it. The holding company I'm targeting, Lux Eterna, is small, but their one asset is a minority stake in Aura. If I can acquire Lux Eterna, I get a seat at Aura's table. And Aura is the Holy Grail. Ainsley placed a bookmark in her book. Why them? Damien laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. Why, Ainsley, don't ought to be dense. Aura isn't a brand, it's a religion. Their profit margins are 90%. They have zero debt. They have zero marketing spend. It's all word of mouth. They are, and I quote my analyst, the most perfectly executed luxury concept in a century. This A person, they're not a designer. They're a killer. They're what I would be if I made handbags. He was mesmerized, in love with the idea of this ruthless, anonymous founder. The problem, so, he continued, pouring himself a large glass of Macallan 25, is that A is a ghost, a phantom. No one knows who they are. They communicate through one lawyer in Zurich. My team has been digging for 6 months. Nothing. It's the most secure corporate structure I've ever seen. Perhaps they simply value their privacy. Ainsley offered. Privacy is a shield for the weak, Damien shot back. This is a power play. A is making the market beg. It's genius. And now they're finally having a runway show in Paris. Everyone is going to be there. And I just got my invitation. He held up his phone, displaying the email. The invitation was stark black, with a single silver A. This is it, he said, his eyes gleaming. This is where I close. I'll be in the front row. When this A finally shows their face, I'll be the first one to shake their hand. I'm taking the jet. You can stay here. Oh, Ainsley said, feigning mild disappointment. I wouldn't want to get in the way of your business, Damien. Besides, Paris is so busy that time of year. Exactly. It's not for you, he said, patting her on the shoulder, a gesture one gives to a dog. You wouldn't enjoy it. It's all fashion. I understand, she said. What she didn't say was that she had received her own invitation because she had designed it. The following week, Damien was consumed with preparation. He was on the phone constantly with Serafina. Ainsley, sitting in the adjoining library, could hear his side of the conversation. Yes, of course you're coming with me. I want you in the front row right beside me. Wear that red dress, the one you wore in Dubai. No, Ainsley's not coming. She thinks... I don't know, she thinks she's visiting her sister in Seattle or something. It's fine. A beat of silence. What? No, she has no idea. She doesn't even know what aura is. She probably thinks it's a new kind of yogurt. He laughed, and Serafina's high-pitched giggle echoed through the speaker. Ainsley closed her laptop. On the screen was the final seating chart for the Paris show. She'd put Damien in the front row, as he'd expected. She'd also seated him directly across from the Vogue photographer's pit. He would be perfectly illuminated. She had also, just an hour ago, finalized the largest business deal of her life. Her holding company, the one in Switzerland, had just completed a reverse acquisition. Damien thought he was buying Lux Eterna to get a piece of aura. But Ainsley's company had just bought Lux Eterna, the very fund Damien was targeting out from under him. The trap was set. Damien was so busy trying to get a seat at the table, he never bothered to find out who owned the house. Javier, Ainsley said into her own secure phone. It's done. The Lux Eterna deal is closed, Javier's voice replied. We own his target. He's officially pitching to us now. And he has no idea. None. His analysts are still sending documents to the old board. The old board is, per our agreement, forwarding them straight to my team. By the way, his bid is insulting. He's lowballing us by about 500 million. Ainsley looked out of the window at the grey New York skyline. He's arrogant. He thinks they're desperate, and he's the savior. Let him keep thinking it. Right up until the show, I want him confident. I want him preening. See you in Paris, Anya, Javier said. See you in Paris, Ainsley replied. She walked back into the living room where Damien was admiring himself in the mirror, practicing his powerful smile. Damien, she said, her voice soft and wifely. What? I've packed your black tie suit, and I put in those new cufflinks you like. Good. Good, he said, distracted. You'll be fine here, right? Order whatever you want. Of course, dear, Ainsley said, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle on his jacket. You just go and get your deal. He smiled a genuine smug smile. I always do. The Rose private jet, a new Gulfstream G800, cut through the sky toward Paris. Inside, Damien Rose and Serafina Croft were drinking Dom Perignon. Serafina was filming everything for her Instagram story. The cashmere blankets, the caviar, Damien's profile, as he looked pensively out the window. Dami, you're so tense, she cooed, draping herself over his seat. You should be celebrating we're going to the Aura show. It's not we, Serafina. It's me, Damien corrected, not unkindly. You're my guest. This is the biggest night of my career. That's all. Once I acquire this brand, you can have all the free handbags you want. But what if A is like ugly? Serafina mused, pouting into her phone camera. It's probably some old bitter woman. I don't care if A is a three-headed dog, Damien said. I'm not buying their looks. I'm buying their genius, their ruthlessness. He looked at his phone, checking his email for the 10th time. A new message from his lead analyst. Subject Lux Eterna Comms. Sir, we've hit a snag. The board at Lux Eterna has suddenly gone dark. The data room has been closed. Damien's blood ran cold. What? They're citing a material change in circumstance. They say all future correspondence must be routed through a new legal firm in Zurich. This is, irregular. Damn it. Damien slammed his fist on the polished wood. What, darling, did we hit turbulence? Serafina asked, annoyed at the interruption. Business, he snapped. The sellers are playing games. He quickly typed a reply. Get me the head of that Zurich firm. Now! I don't care what time it is. I am not losing this deal. He was rattled. For the first time, he felt a flicker of doubt. This A was slippery. This whole operation was. He landed at Le Bourget Airport, a storm cloud of anxiety radiating from him. The mood was sour. "20 minutes later, a second, far more discreet jet landed on the same tarmac. It was a sleek, unmarked Bombardier Global 7500, registered to a Shell corporation in Delaware. Ainsley stepped off the plane. She was not Ainsley. She was Anya. She wore black, wide-leg trousers, a simple silk shell, and oversized sunglasses. Her hair was loose. She carried no luggage save for a single unreleased Eora prototype briefcase. Javier was waiting for her on the tarmac beside a black armored Mercedes. "Welcome to Paris, Anya," he said, taking the briefcase. "The Rose jet landed 20 minutes ago," she said, sliding into the back seat. "Is he rattled?" "He's apoplectic," Javier reported with a thin smile. "His team has been trying to break through our firewall all morning. They are not very good. They're loud, crude, all brute force. He tried to get the personal number for the head of the Zurich firm. The firm, by the way, we own." "Good. Let him sweat," Ainsley said. "How is the venue?" "The Musée Rodin is locked down. The collection is secure. The models are in final fittings. Everything is perfect. And the finale look, it's waiting for you at the studio. It is a masterpiece." Ainsley looked out the window as the car sped toward the 8th arrondissement. She had spent the last 2 weeks living a lie, playing the part of the dutiful simple wife. She had packed her husband's bags so he could go on a romantic trip with his mistress. She had listened to him praise her Anya as a ruthless killer, while dismissing Ainsley as yogurt-brained. The humiliation of the gala had been a catalyst. It had burned away the last lingering traces of the woman she had been. The woman who had perhaps hoped Damien might one day see her. Now she didn't care if he saw her. She only cared that he recognized what he had lost. The Mercedes pulled into a subterranean garage. Ainsley was whisked into a private elevator that took her to the secret Eora creative headquarters in Paris. It was a hive of activity. The next 36 hours were a blur of focused creative warfare. Ainsley was in her element. She was no longer the beige wallpaper. She was the architect. She approved lighting cues. She reordered the model lineup. She personally inspected every single one of the 40 looks, making microscopic adjustments with her own hands. "The tension on this zipper is wrong," she'd say, and an army of artisans would fly to fix it. "The audio needs more bass. I want the floor to vibrate. The lighting for the finale must be a single cold blue-white spotlight. I want it to look like a judgment." She was demanding, exacting, and completely in control. Her team, who revered her, worked without sleep. They would have followed her into battle. And in a way they were. The night before the show, Javier found her alone in the studio, standing before the final look. The suit, it was made of a sharkskin grey material that seemed to drink the light. The jacket was sharply tailored with a high, severe collar, and a waist so cinched it was almost violent. The trousers were wide, flowing like liquid metal. It was power incarnate. "He won't know what hit him," Javier said. "It's not for him," Ainsley said, her voice quiet. "Not really." She touched the sleeve of the suit. "He was right about one thing. He said I wasn't the face of the brand. He was right. Ainsley Rose is a nobody, a ghost. She's the plain wife he married for her non-threatening, old money but no power background. She turned to Javier. Tomorrow, Ainsley Rose dies, and A is finally born. The gardens of the Musée Rodin had been transformed. A massive minimalist black structure had been erected over the famous rose bushes, creating an enclosed cathedral-like runway. The night was cold, but the anticipation was white-hot. This was the most impossible ticket of the decade. The arrival of the guests was a show in itself. Anna Wintour swept in her sunglasses firmly in place, giving a curt nod. Bernard Arnault, the CEO of LVMH and the king of luxury, took his seat. His presence alone, a sign that aura was the real deal. Celebrities: Timothée Chalamet, Kate Blanchett, Zendaya, filed in their faces masks of excited reverence. And then Damien Rose arrived. He was in his element, a king holding court. He wore his black tie suit, the one Ainsley had packed. Serafina was on his arm, poured into a glittering gold dress that left nothing to the imagination. The press exploded. Damien is Rose Capital, making a play for aura. Serafina, are you the new face of the brand? Damien just smiled a confident, wolfish grin. We're all here to admire the art, he said, a perfect, ambiguous quote. He was seated in the front row exactly as Ainsley had planned. He was directly across from the most powerful editors, and crucially, his business rivals. He looked magnificent. He felt invincible. His momentary panic on the jet was gone. He was Damien Rose. He would not be denied. He leaned over to Serafina. Look at this. He's got Arnaud and Pinot here. This A has them all running scared. It's beautiful. I'm just so excited. Serafina breathed already, planning which pieces she would demand. The lights went down. A single heavy bass note dropped so low it shook the floor. Thump, 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 like a giant heartbeat. The show began. It was titled Metamorphosis. The first model, Gigi Hadid, emerged from the darkness. She wore a severe floor-length leather coat, tightly belted, making her look like a beautiful, dangerous spy. The collection that followed was breathtaking. It was not fashion, as Damien understood it. It wasn't loud or logo-heavy. It was armor. There were dresses that looked like sculpted steel jackets, with shoulders sharp enough to cut glass and boots that clicked on the runway with military precision. The colors were stark black charcoal silver and a deep bloody crimson. Damien was stunned. This wasn't handbags, as he'd condescendingly told Ainsley. This was power. This was a statement. He had to have this brand. It was a reflection of his own ruthless soul. The music swelled, a frantic classical techno hybrid. The pace quickened. The final model, walking in a dress that looked like shattered obsidian, completed her pass. The music stopped. The lights went black. The audience held its collective breath. This was the moment. For 10 years, A had been a ghost. Now the ghost was about to appear. Damien leaned forward, his hands clasped, his heart pounding. He could already taste the victory, the headlines, the envy of his peers. Damien Rose acquires aura, a single cold blue-white spotlight, the one Ainsley had called judgment, snapped on, illuminating the head of the runway. A figure stood in the light back to the audience. And now, a disembodied voice echoed through the hall. For the first time, the founder, owner, and creative director of Aura. The figure turned. It was Ainsley. She was not Ainsley, not the beige wallpaper, not the plain wife in the simple black dress. This was A, She was wearing the suit, the shark-skin grey weaponized suit. Her hair was slicked back so severely it looked like a polished helmet. Her makeup was minimalist but stark, emphasizing her high cheekbones and the piercing intelligence in her eyes. She stood for a moment, her gaze sweeping the entire room. Her face devoid of any emotion except absolute, chilling control. The silence in the room was not just quiet. It was a vacuum, a collective global gasp. Anna Wintour, famously inscrutable, slowly removed her sunglasses. Bernard Arnault was leaning forward, his expression one of pure, unadulterated fascination. And Damien Rose froze. His world stopped. His brain implicitly refused to process the data. It was like seeing a statue weep. It was an impossibility. His smile, the one he had practiced in the mirror, was still plastered on his face, a grotesque, frozen mask. His eyes were wet, unblinking. No. No. It's a mistake. It's someone who looks like her. A model. A trick. Serafina beside him was the first to speak. Her voice was a small, confused whisper. Damien, is that? Ainsley began to walk. She didn't stroll. She didn't strut. She strode. Her heavy, custom-made boots clicked on the runway. Click, click, click. The sound was like a countdown. The flashes started. It wasn't the usual flurry of press. It was an explosion. A wall of white light, a sonic boom of 1,000 cameras trying to capture the impossible. Was Ainsley Rose. The wife. The invisible wife. Ainsley walked the entire length of the runway. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She walked as if she were reviewing troops before a battle. Damien's paralysis finally broke. The blood drained from his face, leaving him a sickly pale grey. His phone, which he had been holding to take a photo of A, slipped from his numb fingers and clattered onto the floor. Ainsley reached the end of the runway, stopping directly in front of the photographer's pit, directly in front of her husband. She paused. Slowly, she turned her head. Her eyes, cold and clear, moved past the photographer's, past Serafina's horrified, open-mouthed stare, and locked directly onto Damien's. She held his gaze for 1 second, 2, 3. In her eyes he saw no anger, no pain, no love. He saw nothing. He saw a stranger. He saw a balance sheet that had just been zeroed out. He saw indifference. It was the most terrifying thing he had ever seen. She gave a single short, sharp nod. Acknowledgement. Dismissal. Then she turned, and with the same measured, powerful pace, she walked back into the darkness. The show was over. For a full 5 seconds, the room was utterly silent. Then the applause began. It wasn't just clapping. It was a roar. A standing ovation from the most cynical, powerful people in the world. They were not just applauding a collection. They were applauding the reveal. The sheer, audacious, incredible gall of it. Damien remained seated. He was paralyzed. He couldn't feel his legs. Damien, Serafina whispered her hand on his arm. He shook it off. Get your hand off me, he stammered. The lights came up. The room was chaos. People were on their feet, shouting, talking, moving. My God, it was her, his wife. Did you see his face? Damien's rivals, the ones he had been so proud to sit near, were looking at him. Not with envy, not with respect. They were looking at him with a mixture of pity and predatory hunger. They were smelling blood in the water. "Mr. Vance, Mr. Vance." A reporter from Women's Wear Daily was already there, shouting. "Was this a joint venture? How long have you known?" Damien couldn't speak. He just stared at the empty runway. Serafina, a creature of pure survival, saw the power shift. She saw the cameras on Damien capturing his grey-faced, slack-jawed shock. She saw Ainsley's victory. She stood up, smoothed her gold dress, and without a single word to the man she had arrived with, she vanished into the crowd. Damien Rose was for the first time in his life completely and utterly alone. The after-party was in a private salon within the Musée Rodin, the air thick with champagne and the electric buzz of the decade's greatest revelation. The room, which an hour ago had been full of mutual acquaintances, was now the most exclusive place on earth. The security at the door was no longer the museum's. It was a wall of men in black suits, all bearing the subtle silver A on their lapels. Aura security. Damien, moving in a fog of unreality, pushed through the departing crowd. He was a man possessed, driven by a primal need to confront the source of his cognitive dissonance. He had to get to her. He had to. What Yell demand answers negotiate. He didn't have a plan. He just had to make the world make sense again. He reached the velvet rope. A large man with the impassive face of a presidential guard put a hand up. "Sir, your name?" Damien's entire identity was built on never having to answer that question. "I'm Damien Rose," he said, his voice raw. I'm her husband." The word, once a statement of possession, now tasted like ash. The guard scanned a tablet. He looked up, his face as blank and hard as a marble wall. "Mr. Rose is not on the list. You are not permitted entry." The word struck Damien with the force of a physical blow. Not on the list. He who was the list. "Not on the... I am her husband," he roared, his voice cracking. The composure the ironclad Rose control finally shattered, and a raw, infantile rage poured out. The commotion attracted attention. The crowd around them quieted, phones discreetly rising. The door to the salon opened, and Javier stepped out. He was wearing a perfectly cut Aora suit, his silver goatee neatly trimmed. He looked powerful. Javier. Damien's mind reeled, trying to place him. This was Ainsley's coffee friend, the mild-mannered art consultant she met for lunch. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Let me in." Javier looked at Damien, not with anger, but with a kind of clinical pity. "Mr. Rose, my name is Javier Milan. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Aura." Damien's jaw hung slack. COO. He'd been complaining about his wife's unemployed friend for years. "I am here to ask you to leave," Javier said, his voice as cold and precise as Ainsley's runway. "You are causing a scene." "I am not leaving until I speak to my wife," Damien spat, jabbing a finger past him. "Mrs. Rose," Javier corrected the change in title, a deliberate chilling cut, "is busy. She is in fact speaking with Mr. Arnaud." Through the opened door, Damien had a clear view. It was a tableau from his worst nightmare. Ainsley Anya stood in the center of a circle of the most powerful people in global luxury. She was wearing the shark-skin suit, holding a glass of champagne, and she was laughing. It was a light, genuine laugh, something he hadn't heard in years. She was incandescent, the true center of gravity, while Bernard Arnault, the wolf in Kashmir himself, listened with rapt attention. "Ainsley." Damien shouted a desperate, wounded animal sound. The laughter in the room stopped. Every head turned. Ainsley heard him. Her smile did not falter, but it tightened. She paused, looked over the heads of the billionaires and editors, and her eyes met Javier's. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. No. It was a non-verbal command. He is irrelevant. Handle it. Then she turned back to Mr. Arnault, apologized for the interruption, and resumed her conversation, as if a fly had momentarily buzzed at the window. She had dismissed him, utterly. That single tiny gesture broke something deep inside Damien. "Sir," the guard said, no longer asking. He put a heavy, unyielding hand on Damien's chest. "You must leave. Now." Damien, the corporate raider, the shark, the king, felt the pressure of the guard's hand. He was being handled. He looked at Javier, who just watched, his face impassive. He looked at the closed-off world of the party, a world that had been his, which was now hers. Defeated, humiliated, and utterly, profoundly broken. Damien allowed himself to be escorted, pushed away from the door. He was maneuvered back through the crowd, a gauntlet of whispers and stares, past the main entrance and out into the cold Paris night. The press, smelling the blood, descended. "Damien, is it true she's been running the company for 10 years? Were you an investor? Is Rose Capital involved? Mr. Rose, is your marriage a fraud?" He stumbled onto the curb, blinded by the flashes. His car, the Maybach he had arrived in, was gone. Serafina, a creature of pure parasitic survival, had recognized the exact moment the tide had turned and had predictably abandoned the sinking ship. He stood alone on the pavement, the man who thought he was acquiring the world, with no way to even get back to his hotel. The next 24 hours were a financial bloodbath. Damien's journey home was not on the G800. The jet, he learned from a frantic, weeping assistant, had been grounded. The loan on it, held by a subsidiary of a Swiss bank, had been called. The plane was an asset of Rose Capital, and Rose Capital was in freefall. He flew commercial in a middle seat in business class, an indignity that felt like a physical illness. His phone, normally a symphony of demands, was terrifyingly silent. The friends he had cultivated, the rivals he had intimidated, all gone. The only messages were a stream of panicked, terrified texts from his analysts and a single ice-cold email from his bank's legal team formally demanding a call. The headlines were not just articles. They were obituaries for his reputation. Forbes. The Rose Deception. How the world's hottest luxury brand was built by an invisible wife. Wall Street Journal. Rose Capital deal for Lux Eterna. Implodes as Aura founder revealed. Vogue. A is for Anya and for absolute. The story had been pieced together with horrifying speed. Ainsley Anya Rose, sole founder and creative director. Aura, her singular creation. And the final killing blow, Lux Eterna, the obscure fund Damien had been ruthlessly targeting, had been quietly acquired by Aura's parent holding company a week ago. Damien Rose hadn't been a buyer. He had been a supplicant. He had been arrogantly pitching to his own wife's board. And they, as Javier had reported, had found his bid insulting. Rose Capital's stock, which was intrinsically tied to Damien's personal brand of infallible genius, plummeted 41% at the opening bell. It was a rout. His investors, furious at being made to look like fools, were already forming a committee. They were calling for his resignation. He was toxic. He finally arrived at the cold white penthouse. The key still worked. He stepped inside, the silence of the massive apartment pressing in on him. "Ainsley!" he called out. His voice was hoarse. She was there. Not in the back bedroom, but in the grand living room. She wasn't wearing the Aura power suit. She was in her Ainsley uniform, simple dark jeans and a grey cashmere sweater. She was carefully placing a small framed photo into a cardboard box. A wave of desperate, pathetic relief washed over him. The Anya nightmare was over. This was his Ainsley. The plain one. The one who managed the house. The one he could control. "Ainsley," he said, his voice hardening as he tried to reclaim his power. What was that show in Paris? What the hell did you do? You humiliated me." Ainsley didn't look up. She carefully wrapped a small, abstract sculpture in bubble wrap, her hands steady. "I humiliated you?" she asked, her voice calm, conversational. "That's an interesting perspective." This is insane," he raved, stalking into the room. "You built a company behind my back, a handbag company." "Yes," she said, placing the sculpture in the box. He felt the familiar surge of righteous anger. He was on solid ground now. This was business. This was law. "While married to me, Ainsley, do you have any idea what you've done? That's my company. That's community property. Half of Iora is mine." This was it, the final negotiation. He could still salvage this. He'd lost the battle, but he would win the war. He'd take half. He'd take control. He'd save her from this. A small, cruel smile touched his lips. He still had her. Ainsley finally stopped packing. She placed her hands on the edge of the cardboard box and straightened up. She turned to him, her face not angry, not sad, just patient, like a teacher about to explain a very simple concept to a very slow child. "Do you remember our prenuptial agreement, Damien?" she asked. He hesitated, the smile faltering. "Of course. Standard. Your lawyers talked to my lawyers. It protects my assets from you." He said it with a remaining flicker of pride. "Yes, it does." She agreed, her voice gentle. "It protects all premarital assets. And it also protects, and I quote, all businesses' profits and entities created independently during the marriage, provided no marital funds were co-mingled." She walked to the sterile white desk where he had signed so many billion-dollar deals. She picked up a single leather-bound file. "You were very proud of it," she continued, walking back toward him. "You told me it was ironclad to protect you from me." She opened the file. "You funded Rose Capital with your trust fund, a pre-marital asset. I funded Iora with my grandmother's inheritance, a premarital asset. You called it pin money, Damien. You told me to buy a nice painting." She laid the file on the box. "You were so dismissive of my little hobby that you never once thought to ask about it. You never once thought to include it in our joint filings because you didn't think it was real. You didn't think I was real." She tapped the last page, the signature page. "This is Appendix B, Aura Holdings SARL. Your signature is right next to it. You signed it, Damien. You signed it without reading it, because you looked at me and you saw nothing." Damien's legs gave out. He gripped the back of a white Eames chair to hold himself up. The blood drained from his face, leaving him a sickly pale grey. "It's all mine," Ainsley said, her voice not triumphant, just factual. "Aura, the holding company, Lux Eterna." She paused, as if remembering a final item on a grocery list. "And as of this morning, the bank that holds the primary note on Rose Capital. After today's stock collapse, your company is in breach of its loan covenants. My holding company acquired that debt from the bank. We are calling in the loan you personally guaranteed." He stared at her, his mind a howling void. It wasn't just that he didn't get her money. It was that she was actively, legally, and permanently taking his. You're ruining me," he whispered the words, barely audible. "No," Ainsley said, turning back to her box and picking up the roll of packing tape. "You ruined yourself. You just didn't realize it because you were too busy looking in the mirror." She taped the box shut, the sound of the tape ripping through the silence like a scream. "But why?" he whispered, his voice finally breaking. The bluster was gone. The anger was gone. All that was left was a hollow, terrified confusion. "Why this? Why do all this?" Ainsley picked up the box. She paused at the door, her back to him. She didn't turn around. "You mocked me, Damien," she said, her voice quiet but echoing in the vast, empty room. "You mocked me for being practical. You humiliated me at the gala. You called me wallpaper. You were right. I am practical. I'm practical enough to know that a woman should always have her own power, and I am wallpaper." She finally turned her eyes, clear and cold, locking onto his, the kind that holds up the entire crumbling house. She turned to leave. The finality of the act hit him. "Ainsley, wait. Please," he begged, stumbling after her. He was weeping now, ugly, desperate sobs. "Don't go, I love you, I see you now." This was his last pathetic gamble. The plea. Ainsley stopped at the elevator, her finger on the button. She looked back at him, the great Damien Rose, a broken, terrified man in a crumpled suit, weeping in his white tomb. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, she saw the man she had once loved. A flicker of the old Ainsley, a deep, ancient sadness crossed her eyes. "No, Damien," she said softly, her voice filled with a terrible final pity. "You don't see me. You just see A. And she is not interested in you." The elevator doors opened. She stepped in. The doors slid shut, leaving him alone in the cold, white mausoleum. A billionaire in name, only a king with no subjects, and a husband with no wife. The story of Ainsley Rose is a reminder that the people the world dismisses as wallpaper are often the ones holding the building together. What did you think of Damien's shocking downfall? Was Ainsley's revenge a cold, calculated masterpiece or a necessary act of liberation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories about justice, hidden power, and seeing the arrogant get what they deserve, then please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel. You won't want to miss the stories we have coming up next.